Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is the secret doctrine we are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but people find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of the secret doctrine with the Sons of God and the Sacred Island. The legend given in Isis in relation to a portion of the globe which science now concedes to have been the cradle of humanity, though it is but one of the 7 cradles, in truth, ran, condensed, and now explained as follows. Now, my understanding of this and her understanding of this are two different things, right? She sees this as 7 different people being created in 7 different places in 7 different epochs. I don't, right? I think that there was an event, a worldwide catastrophe, and that some people were saved, whether that was by entities or a higher human, right? Either way, they were led to be saved. Some of them created boats and were saved in boats. Some of them were led underground, were saved underground, and a couple of them were saved by being brought to the top of a mountain. All of these things are concurrent with each other, and so for me, it is more likely that there were 7 arcs, 7 different places where people were saved, as opposed to a single person who was saved and that repopulated the planet, or that there was these 7 different layers of becoming human, right? You started off ethereal and then semi-ethereal and then not quite all the way ethereal, and then you got a corporeal body. I don't believe that, right? But this 7 cradles, that can absolutely be truth, right? Mount Ararat is recorded as one, but the Hopi have a whole different one, and the people in Peru have a whole different one, and the people in Siberia, they've got a different one too. And so it is important to remember that there are many recordings of many people being saved from a worldwide catastrophe. All right, back to the text. Tradition says, and the records of the great book, the Book of Dizan, explain that long before the days of Adam and his inquisitive wife, Hiva, where now are found but salt lakes and desolate barren deserts, there was a vast inland sea which extended over Middle Asia, north of the proud Himalayan range and its western prolongation. An island which, for its unparalleled beauty, had no rival in the world, was inhabited by the last remnant of the race which preceded ours. Now, again, I have several unconventional beliefs, and one of those is the 12,000-year disaster cycle, which is probably going to figure pretty prominently today. The video will be linked in the corner above, on YouTube at least. I can't do that on the rest of them. This is almost certainly a true thing, right? And that leads into what I believe, the 12,000-year disaster cycle. This is confirmation bias, right? I am seeing what I want to see in this, but it fits. I believe that the Earth rotates 90 degrees. This is explained in greater detail there. But when it does so, the bulge around the equator moves, right? Where the North and the South Pole currently are, Antarctica and the Arctic, will be and have been before at the equator. And where the equator is, at least 2 points of it, was at the North and the South Pole. This change causes the bulge in the middle around the equator to move. It now becomes a new bulge around a new equator. Part of the process of that is that some of the Earth is going to rise up and some of it is going to sink down. This absolutely explains the Atlantis myth. Timaeus, over in the Ancient Lore playlist, will give you more information on that. But it is almost certain that this did indeed happen. There is a similar thing as what is being described here that happened on North America. Louisiana and the entire Ohio Valley, right? was once underwater, all the way up through Canada and around the side of Alaska. That again plays into what I believe. That again is some confirmation bias, right? The Great Salt Flats in the United States is the exact same thing as what is being described here. And so this is an independent confirmation of these two things happening in two different places of the world, which exactly correlate with what is described in the 12,000 year disaster cycle. Back to the text. The last remnant meant the sons of will and yoga, who, with a few tribes, survived the great cataclysm. For it is the third race which inhabited the great Lemurian continent that preceded the veritable and complete human races, the fourth and the fifth. And again, this is something that I am in not accord with, or I do believe that there was a Lemurian continent. I believe that it was contemporaneous with the Atlantean continent. Both of them were continents, not just little islands. They were massive. And it is my understanding, right, my speculations, that those two places are probably the source for the peopling of the world, right? When this disaster happened, some of these people on these two continents survived, and they went to the new places. Greece, North America, South America, Africa, some of those places that previously had been underwater. Back to the text. Therefore, it was said in Isis that this race could live with equal ease in water, air, or fire, for it had an unlimited control over the elements. These were the sons of God, not those who saw the daughters of men, but the real Elohim. Though in the Oriental Kabbalah they have another name, it was they who imparted nature's most weird secrets to men and revealed to them the ineffable and now lost word. I have a word. The island, according to belief, exists to the present hour as an oasis, surrounded by the dreadful wildness of the great desert, the Gobi, whose sands no foot hath crossed in the memory of man. This word, which is no word, has travelled once around the globe and still lingers as a far-off, dying echo in the hearts of some privileged men. The hierophants of all the sacerdotal colleges were aware of the existence of this island, but the word was known only to the Yava Alim, Mahat Kohan in another tongue, or chief lord of every college, and was passed to his successor only at the moment of death. There were many such colleges, and the old classic authors speak of them. It is important to understand that this is exactly how knowledge would be lost, right? If there were these colleges, and they were independent of each other, and only one person had this particular knowledge, then any death of that person at an inopportune time eliminates that knowledge from the college. That is almost certainly something that will happen, and it is one of those reasons why I don't particularly care for the clubs, right? This college is a club. A club is anything with shared rules and governings, right? So it can be a government, it can be a religion, it can be a mystery school. Any of that can be a club. And these clubs tend to guard their secrets pretty well because, for the most part, they like power. They like keeping people in the dark. They like feeling superior to other people. And this is one of the problems with something along those lines. Holding back knowledge just because you want to feel superior to somebody or you feel somebody else is unworthy for that knowledge is pretty shitty. It makes you a pretty shitty human, and is one of the reasons why I so freely give away mine. Right? Everything I talk about on here is free on the internet, right? I have just recently condensed most of this information that I talk about, and I've got a book coming out in 6 days, and that is going to cost money. It is, but all of the information is here. You just have to dig for it. This is going to be a condensed version. But this knowledge needs to be out there, and the best way to get it is to make people pay for it, because when you pay for something, you value it a little bit more. I like giving it away free. I wish I could entirely give it away free, but that's just not something that works in reality. Right? All of the information contained in my book that I wrote is freely available on the internet right now and will remain so. back to the text. Like this whole the word dying because somebody died is stupid. Right now, I have a word, but I'm not allowed to give it to you. It's one of the few restrictions that I have. Right, there are some knowledge that I can't give, and that's one of them. And it is for a reason. And trust me, I am not a fan of not doing it, but I've hinted at it a couple of times. You could probably pick it up. It's not that difficult to get. But I cannot directly give it to you because knowledge earned is knowledge learned. And while I can freely give away most knowledge, that is one in particular that you have to earn. All right, now back to the text. There was no communication with the fair island by sea, but subterranean passages, known only to the chiefs, communicated with it in all directions. Footnote. There are archaeologists who, like Mr. James Ferguson, deny the great antiquity of even one single monument in India. That is dumb. In his work, that is trying to force your viewpoint into the evidence, right? I'm vehemently against that, right? If the evidence correlates with me, I will point it out and I will acknowledge my confirmation bias. If it doesn't comport with what I believe, I'm not going to automatically dismiss it. I'm going to investigate it. And if you have carvings that are obviously from antiquity, it does no one any good to try to deny that fact. In his work, Illustrations of the Rock-Cut Temples of India, the author ventures to express the very extraordinary opinion that Egypt had ceased to be a nation before the earliest of the cave temples in India was excavated. That is entirely wrong. In short, he does not admit the existence of any cave anterior to the reign of Asoka, and seems anxious to prove that most of these rock-cut temples were executed during a period extending from the time of that pious Buddhist king until the destruction of the Andhra dynasty of Maghata in the beginning of the 5th century. We believe such a claim perfectly arbitrary. Further discoveries will show that it is erroneous and unwarranted, and we have the lens of history. There is no doubt whatsoever that the caves and the carvings in India are from antiquity. At least concurrent with ancient Egypt, right? Not it passed away and then moved to Egypt. That is not what happened. Tradition asserts, and archaeology accepts the truth of, the legend that there is more than one city now flourishing in India, which is built on several other cities, making thus a subterranean city of 6 or 7 stories high. Delhi is one of them. Allahabad, another. Examples of this being found even in Europe, e.g. in Florence, which is built on several defunct Etruscan and other cities. Why then could not Ellora, Elephanta, Carli, and Ajunta have been built on subterranean labyrinths and passages, as claimed? Of course, we do not allude to the caves which are known to every European, whether de visu or through hearsay, notwithstanding their enormous antiquity, though that is so disputed by modern archaeology. But it is a fact known to the initiated Brahmins of India, and especially to the yogis, that there is not a cave temple in the country but has its subterranean passages running in every direction, and that those underground caves and endless corridors have in their turn their caves and corridors. Who can tell that the lost Atlantis, which is also mentioned in the secret book, but again under another name, pronounced in the sacred language, did not exist in those days? We went on to ask. It did exist most assuredly, as it was fast approaching its greatest days of glory and civilization when the last of the Lemurian continents went down. And again, I believe that this was concurrent, not separate. The great lost continent might have, perhaps, been situated south of Asia, extending from India to Tasmania. That is not far off. America, when discovered, was called Atlanta by some native tribes. That was footnote 1. That's weird, right? Why is that the footnote for the Lemurian? America, when discovered, was called Atlanta by some native tribes. the Great Lost Continent might have been situated south of Asia. Like, these are two completely unrelated things. Like, now to me they're concurrent, but to them they're not. I don't understand why that is a footnote. It does not make sense. If the hypothesis, now so much doubted and positively denied by some learned authors who regard it as a joke of Plato's, is ever verified, then perhaps the scientists will believe that the description of the God-inhabited continent was not altogether a fable. So are they trying to say that Atlantis extended from India to Tasmania? Because that is patently untrue. But note 2. Since then, Donnelly's Atlantis has appeared, and soon its actual existence will have become a scientific fact. That did not happen. I don't even know where Donnelly's was, so... And they may then perceive that Plato's guarded hints and his attributing the narrative to Solon and the Egyptian priest were but a prudent way of imparting the fact to the world, and, by cleverly combining truth and fiction, so disconnecting himself from a story which the obligations imposed at initiation forbid him to divulge. And I think that that is just simply her saying something, right? That is just simply her rationalizing her belief, which is in direct opposition to the recorded facts, right? The only full description that we have at all of Atlantis comes from Timaeus. And in Timaeus, there is no doubt, right? If you read through Timaeus, what she is saying here is simply not true. Lemuria and Atlantis were not the same continents. They were not located in the same place. I don't even know where the source material for Lemuria is. I have seen several legends, but nothing on the lines of what we have from Plato, right? Plato is recording a third-hand account. It is Solon talking to Plato, but he is recounting what was told to him by the Egyptian priests. And that is what is recorded. So it is a third-hand account being recorded. Whereas what we see with Lemuria is mostly speculation. I have not found a good source material of the type that we have for Timaeus for Lemuria. So it is possible that Lemuria did not ever exist, although that is doubtful. It may have had a different name, right? Mu and Lemuria were probably the same continent in two different time periods, right? So there are legends attached to these that we do not have the ability to track down. But Atlantis we do. Atlantis, we have a source material, and it tells us very descriptive things about it. It tells us the size of Atlantis was enormous. It was the size, at least, of Saharan Africa, everything above the mountains. It was large enough to have 10 separate large kingdoms in them, where there was some opposition, but not a whole lot. It mostly was peaceful for the most part. But there's a lot of things that we are told about them and their organization and how the city was put together. And people have what they want to pull out of that, right? The whole Eye of the Sahara, right? Here's something for Jimmy Corsetti, right? The way that it is described in the account from Solon was that it was existent in the ocean past the Pillars of Hercules, right? And that it had a size according with Saharan Africa. If it is being compared to Saharan Africa, not in a direct way, not it was Saharan Africa, but it was described as being the same size as Saharan Africa, well, that just tells us that it was not the same place, right? And so the Eye of the Sahara, being in the Sahara, is not going to be part of Atlantis. Now, I understand why Jimmy wants to believe that. There are good reasons to want to believe that. But what is there does not comport nearly closely enough with what is recorded. Right? There are concentric rings. I can explain those. There are other things in the area. We can explain those, including the water. Right? That is part of the disaster cycle. That makes sense. We can talk about these things. What we don't want to do is to take what is an account written and given to us as good faith account of this thing happened and insert that where we want to in order to make it fit with our beliefs. which is what she is doing here, right? There is zero reason to believe that Atlantis and Lemuria were the same place. There are reasons to believe that they could have been concurrent, but not that they were the same place. They were separated by a great distance. And they may have even been oppositional to each other. The war going on in Atlantis, according to Timaeus, might have been with Lemuria. Back to the text. To continue the tradition, we have to add that the class of Hierophants was divided into two distinct categories. Footnote 3. It is so divided to this day, and theosophists and occultists who have learned something of the occult but undeniable power of Dukpaship at their own expense know this but too well. I'm going to pop this out for later investigation. I'll come back to that. All right. In other words, they were the Lemuro-Atlanteans. No, the first who had a dynasty of spirit kings, not of manes or ghosts, as some believe, see pneumatology, but of actual living devas, or demigods, or angels again, who had assumed bodies to rule over them, and who, in their turn, instructed them in arts and sciences. Now, there is no reason to believe that Atlantis and Lemuria were the same place, right? Other than wanting it to be so. Wanting to say, well, this was the source for the Indian people, who later went all this way. Now, I believe that all of this was concurrent, that these things happened at the same time. When Atlantis went down and Lemuria went down, they dispersed. Some of those people went to India, some of those people went to Iran, some of those people went to South Africa, some of those people probably made it to the Philippines, right? To Australia and New Zealand and Tasmania. All of these places were where Lemuria went. Atlantis went to Greece and North Africa and West Africa and North America and South America, Greenland. That was where those people went. That is why the cultures are similar. Some of the beliefs are similar, but not exactly. Because these people recorded this thing, and these people recorded this thing from the same source with slight variation. Back to the text. Only, as they were rupa, or material spirits, these Dhyanis were not always good. Their king, Thevavatata, was one of the latter. Tehevatata was one of the latter, and it is under the evil influence of this king demon that the Atlantis race became a nation of wicked magicians. In consequence of this, war was declared, the story of which would be too long to narrate. Its substance may be found in the disfigured allegories of the race of Cain, the giants, and that of Noah and his righteous family. The conflict came to an end by the submersion of the Atlantis, which finds its imitation in the stories of the Babylonian and Mosaic flood. Wrong. Again, right? This was, see the Bible study, but the first 5 books were taken from other people, almost certainly. Moses may not have even been a real person. Right? There are many reasons to believe that, and the Bible study will get your toes a little bit less stepped on. But to say that this was a retelling is possible, but not a good one. And the lack of details which are given in other places does not lend any credence to it. The story of Noah and his righteous family was taken completely from the Sumerians, just changing one name out of 4. And so there are a lot of reasons not to go with this. But back to the text. Like, there's no reason to believe that they were wicked magicians. Right? As far as I am aware, that's not what was intimated in the text of Timaeus. The giants and magicians and all flesh died, and every man, all except Zethustra and Noah, who are substantially identical with the great father of the Tahinatkians in the Popol Vuh, or the sacred book of the Guatemalans, which also tells of his escaping in a large boat like the Hindu Noah, via Vasavata. Unopistatim. I think that's his name. If we believe the tradition at all, we have to credit the further story that from the intermarrying of the progeny of the Hierophants of the island and the descendants of the Atlantean Noah sprang up a mixed race of righteous and wicked. Do you see the direct contradiction here? Do you see it? I do. It's definitely jumped out to me. What did it say right here? All flesh died, and every man. Then how was there how did that work? How is that a possibility? If everybody died except these people in this one boat, how did they go about intermarrying the progeny of the Hierophants? How does that happen? How does that happen? Because your story is not correct. That is how that happens. On the one side, the world had its Enochs, Moseses, various Buddhas, and numerous saviors, and great Hierophants. On the other hand, its natural magicians, who, through lack of restraining power of proper spiritual enlightenment, perverted their gifts to evil purposes. We may supplement this by the testimony of some records and traditions. In the Histoire des Voyages, les pupilles de les contenus disparus, the author says, one of the most ancient legends of India, preserved in the temples by oral and written tradition, relates that several 100,000 years ago there existed in the Pacific Ocean an immense continent which was destroyed by geological upheaval, and the fragments of which must be sought in Madagascar, Ceylon, Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and the principal isles of Polynesia. That sounds like something I said. The high plateau of Hindustan and Asia, according to this hypothesis, would only have been represented in those distant epochs by great islands contiguous to the central continent. According to the Brahmins, this country had attained a high civilization, and the peninsula of Hindustan, enlarged by the displacement of the waters at the time of the Grand Cataclysm, has but continued the chain of the primitive traditions born in this place. These traditions give the name of Rutas to the peoples which inhabited this immense equinoctial continent, and from their speech was derived the Sanskrit, and the Indo-Hellenic tradition preserved by the most intelligent population which immigrated from the plains of India, equally relates the existence of a continent and a people to which it gives the name of Atlantis and Atlantides, and which it locates in the Atlantic, in the northern portion of the tropics. So definitely not in the same place as Lemuria. Apart from this fact, the supposition of an ancient continent in those latitudes, the vestiges of which may be found in the volcanic islands and mountainous surface of the Azores, the Canaries, and Cape de Verdes, is not devoid of geographical probability. See the 12,000-year disaster cycle or my video on Atlantis. The Greeks, who moreover never dared to pass beyond the Pillars of Hercules on account of their dread of the mysterious ocean, appeared too late in antiquity for the stories preserved by Plato to be anything else than an echo of the Indian legend. Wrong. Right? They could have gotten from the other, right? Greece was not the only city. It was not the only country, right? The only place, right? It was not the only place where events were recorded. Egypt existed. And I understand that she believes that Egypt came from India, but I have a different explanation for that. Some of the people in Egypt may have come from Lemuria, and some of them may have come from Atlantis. Regardless, Egypt is where we have the source material from. Our account that the people left through the Pillar of Hercules to go to Atlantis comes from Egypt, again leading to it not being Atlantis. It is more likely and even probable that the Greek people were indeed descended from pilgrims who left Egypt, and so they were later from Egypt and got their stories from Egypt, and so they don't have to be the primary account. Yes, Plato made the primary account, but it was a third-hand account that he was recording from Solon when he visited Egypt from his ancestor who came from Egypt. Back to the text. Moreover, when we cast a look on a planisphere, at the sight of the islands and islets strewn from the Malayan archipelago to Polynesia, from the Straits of Sunda to Easter Island, it is impossible, upon the hypothesis of continents preceding those which we inhabit, not to place there the most important of all, and that was probably Lemuria. A religious belief common to Malacca and Polynesia, that is to say, to the two opposite extremes of the oceanic world, affirms that all these islands once formed two immense countries, inhabited by yellow men and black men, always at war, and that the gods, wearied with their quarrels, having charged ocean to pacify them, the latter swallowed up the two continents, and since it has been impossible to make him give up his captives, alone the mountain peaks and high plateau escaped the flood by the power of the gods, who perceived too late the mistake they had committed. Whatever there may be in these traditions, and whatever may have been the place where a civilization more ancient than that of Rome, of Greece, of Egypt, and of India was developed, it is certain that this civilization did exist, and it is highly important to science to recover its traces, however feeble and fugitive they may be. The last tradition corroborates the one given from the records of the secret doctrine. And, right, this yellow and black is going to lead into what I believe just as much as into what she believes, right? If the yellow and black were populating Lemuria and the white and the tan were populating Atlantis, that would explain a couple of things too. Now, I'm not saying that that is definite at all. But I am saying that I believe these things were concurrent, and this record makes sense in light of that. The war mentioned between the yellow and the black men relates to the struggle between the sons of God and the sons of giants, or the inhabitants and magicians of Atlantis, and again, that is patently untrue. Atlantis is where we derive the name Atlantic, right? Atlas formed Atlantis. His 10 children ruled Atlantis, and the ocean is named after him, which is from the island. And so, again, this is just another way of stating Lemuria and Atlantis were not the same. Right? Especially if you're talking about Polynesia, right? We are talking about a vast distance of separation, right? This is not like New Zealand and Australia, right? They're relatively close. This is Australia and North America. They are vastly separated, opposite ends of the planet, on the opposite side of the globe, right? Atlantis and Lemuria were equally on opposite sides of the globe. The final conclusion of the author, who personally visited all the islands of Polynesia. Excuse me. There's an awful lot of islands in Polynesia, several hundred, right? Now, maybe you're just talking about the actual Polynesian chain, but you have the Samoan chains, you have the Filipino chains, like all of those are related. And devoted years to the study of the religion, language, and traditions of nearly all the peoples. Again, that is impressive. Right, you have several different languages in Polynesia by itself, not counting all the rest of them, but counting all the rest of them, that is more. So, as to the Polynesian continent, which disappeared at the time of the final geological cataclysms, that's not the final ones, we still have some coming. Its existence rests on such proofs that to be logical we can doubt no longer. The three summits of this continent, the Sandwich Islands, New Zealand, Easter Island, are distant from each other from 15 to 1800 leagues, and the groups of intermediate islands, Viti, Samoa, Tonga, Fortuna, Oave, the Marquesas, Tahiti, Pomatu, Gambiers, are themselves distant from these extreme points from 7 to 800 to 1,000 leagues. All navigators agree in saying that the extreme and the central groups could never have communicated in view of their actual geographical position and with insufficient means they had at hand. It is physically impossible to cross such distances in a pirogue without a compass and travel months without provisions. On the other hand, the aborigines of the Sandwich Islands, of Viti, of New Zealand, of the central groups of Samoa, Tahiti, etc., had never known each other, had never heard of each other before the arrival of the Europeans. And yet each of these people maintained that their island had at one time formed part of an immense stretch of land which extended towards the west on the side of Asia. And all, brought together, were found to speak the same language, to have the same usages, the same customs, the same religious beliefs, and all to the question, "Where is the cradle of your race?" for sole response, extended their hands towards the setting sun. There is vast differences in the languages, right? That is not to say that they don't have the same root, but they have diverged significantly through the course of time across these distances to where they are independent languages and not necessarily the same language. Now, that can come from the same root, right? The Romantic languages, French, English, Spanish, all come from Latin, right? They all have the same root, even though they are divergent. It's the same thing here. Geographically, this description clashes slightly with the facts in the secret records, but it shows the existence of such traditions, and this is all one cares for. Let's just take the parts that we want to correlate and throw out the rest. For, as there is no smoke without fire, so a tradition must be based on some approximate truth. In its proper place, we will show modern science fully corroborating the above and the traditions of the secret doctrine with regard to the two lost continents. The Easter Island relics are, for instance, the most astounding and eloquent memorials of the primeval giants. They are as grand as they are mysterious, and one has but to examine the heads of the colossal statues that have remained unbroken on that island to recognize in them, at a glance, the features of the type and character attributed to the fourth race giants. They seem of one cast, though indifferent in features, that of a distinctly sensual type, such as the Atlanteans, the Daitas and Atalanteans are represented to have in the esoteric Hindu books. Compare these with the faces of some other colossal statues in Central Asia, those near Bamiyan, for instance, the portrait statues, tradition tells us, of Buddhas belonging to previous Manvantaras. Of those Buddhas and heroes who are mentioned in the Buddhist and Hindu works as men of fabulous size. Footnote. An approach to the statues at Baiman, also a Buddha 200 feet high, is found near a Jain settlement in southern India, and appears to be the only one that remains at present. As men of fabulous size, the good and holy brothers of their wicked co-uterine brothers, generally as Ravana, the giant king of Lanka, was the brother of Kumbhakarna, all descendants of the gods through the rishis, and thus, like Titan and his enormous brood, all heaven's firstborn. These Buddhas, though often spoiled by the symbolical representation of the great pendant ears, shows a suggestive difference perceived at a glance between the expression of their faces and that of Easter Isle statues. They may be of one race, but the former are sons of God, the latter the brood of mighty sorcerers. That is speculation. In light of recent scientific discoveries, we will talk, right? The Easter Island heads are not merely heads. They are full statuettes, almost exclusively, most of which was buried under significant accumulation. Now, how that accumulated, that is an argument, right? Mud floods being a thing, that is entirely possible. That is speculative. But It appears that after the submergence of the Lemurian continent, what has happened was several of these ocean tribes from the Polynesian chain, the Samoan chain, and these places were looking for one particular place to go and pay homage, and they found it on Easter Island, right? They created these stones in memorial of something, absolutely, on this place after the submergence of Lemuria. Seems to be the best explanation, although it's not a fully guaranteed one. But it does appear that there were regular ritualistic migrations is the wrong word, pilgrimages to this as a holy place, right? And so they're not looking upon these stones as some evil sorcerer. They are looking upon these stones as their ancestors. That is important to maintain for factual accuracy, right? Now, we have the lens of history to look through. She was going off of what she already believed. It could be that they were a brood of mighty sorcerers cursed by the gods, or it could be that it was just simply the time for the disaster cycle to happen. Back to the text. All these are reincarnations, however, and apart from unexploitable exaggerations in popular fancy and tradition, they are historical characters. Footnote 2. Even Wilson admits that Rama and Ravana were personages founded on historical facts. The traditions of southern India uniformly ascribing its civilization and the settlement of civilized Hindus, the fifth race, to the conquest of Lanka by Rama, the victory of the sons of God over the Atlantean sorcerers, says the true tradition. Notice that this part is added by Mrs. Blavatsky. When did they live? How long ago lived the two races, the third and the fourth? And how long after did the various tribes of the fifth begin their strife, the wars between good and evil? We are assured by the Orientalists that chronology is both hopelessly mixed and absurdly exaggerated in the Puranas and other Hindu scriptures. We feel quite prepared to agree with the accusation. Yet, if Aryan writers did allow their chronological pendulum to swing too far one way, occasionally, beyond the legitimate limit of fact, nevertheless, when the distance of the deviation is compared with the distance of the Orientalist deviation in the opposite direction, moderation will be found on the Brahmanical side. How about some whataboutism? There's nothing like a good logical fallacy thrown in the middle of your scientific dissertation. It is the pundit who will, in the long run, be found more truthful and nearer to fact than the Sanskritist. Surely it is not because the curtailing of the latter, even when proven to have been resorted to in order to fit a personal hobby, is regarded by Western public opinion as a cautious acceptance of facts, whereas the pundit is brutally treated in print as a liar, that everyone has to see this in the same light. An impartial observer may judge it otherwise. He may either proclaim it both unscrupulous historians, or justify both, each on his respective ground, and say, Hindu Aryans wrote for their initiates who read truth between the lines, not for the masses. If they did mix up events and confuse ages intentionally, it was not in view of deceiving anyone, but to preserve their knowledge from the prying eye of the foreigner, by deceiving someone. Like, quite literally, quit. Right? We're not doing it to deceive anyone. We're simply doing it to deceive people. Otherwise, to him, who can count the generations from the Manus and the series of incarnations specified in the cases of some heroes. Footnote. Thus, we are shown one hero to give an instance. Firstborn as the unrighteous but valiant monarch, Purusha, of the Daityas, Hiranyakasipu, slain by the avatar Narasena, man-lion, when he was born as Ravana, the giant king of Lanka, and killed by Rama, after which he is reborn as Sisupala, the son of Raja Rishi, King Rishi, Damaghosha, when he is again killed by Krishna, the last incarnation of Vishnu. This parallel evolution of Vishnu, spirit, with the Daitya, as men, may seem meaningless, yet it gives us the key not only to the respective dates of Rama and Krishna, but even to a certain psychological mystery, specified in the cases of some heroes. The meaning and chronological order are very clear in the Puranas. As for the Western Orientalist, he must be excused on account of his undeniable ignorance of the methods used by the archaic esotericism. But such existing prejudices will have to give way and disappear very soon before the light of new discoveries. Already, Dr. Weber's and Mr. Max Muller's favorite theories, namely that writing was not known in India, even in the days of Panini, that the Hindus had all their arts and sciences, even to the zodiac and their architecture, Ferguson, from the Macedonian Greeks, these and other such cock and bull hypotheses are threatened with ruin. It is the ghost of old Chaldea that comes to the rescue of truth. In his third Hibbert lecture, 1887, Professor Sayce of Oxford, speaking of newly discovered Assyrian and Babylonian cylinders, referred at length to Yah, the god of wisdom, now identified with the Ioannis of Berosus, the half-man, half-fish, who taught the Babylonians culture and the art of writing. This Oan, to whom, thanks only to the biblical deluge, an antiquity of hardly 1500 BC had been hitherto allowed, is now spoken of in these terms. His city was Eridu, which stood 6,000 years ago on the shores of the Persian Gulf. This name means the good city, a particularly holy spot, since it was the center from which the earliest Chaldean civilization made its way to the north. As the culture god was represented as coming from the sea, it was possible that the culture of the Eridu was of foreign importation. We now know that there was intercourse at a very early period between Chaldea and the Sinaitic Peninsula, as well as with India. The statues discovered by the French at Tello, dating from at least 4000 BC, were made of extremely hard stone known as diorite, and the inscriptions on them stated the diorite to have been brought from Mazan, in example the Sinaitic Peninsula, which was then ruled by the pharaohs. The statues are known to resemble, in general style, the diorite statue Khephren, the builder of the second pyramid, while according to Mr. Petrie, the unit of measurement marked on the plan of the city, which one of the Tello figures holds in his lap, is the same as that employed by the pyramid builders. Teakwood has been found at Mughia, or Ur of the Chaldees, although that wood is an Indian special product. Add to this that the ancient Babylonian list of clothing mentions sindhu, or muslins, explained as vegetable cloth. Muslin, best known now as Dhaka muslin, known in Chaldea as Hindu, Sindhu, and teakwood, used 4,000 years BC, and yet the Hindus, to whom Chaldea owes its civilization, as well proven by Colonel von Kennedy, were ignorant of the art of writing before the Greeks taught them their alphabet, if we have to believe Orientalists. And that is going to bring us to the end of the Sons of God and the Sacred Island. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. There's a lot of speculation in here. I have done a lot of speculation. But if you would like to have more of the Atlantis speculation, I recommend Timaeus, and I recommend the 12,000 Year Disaster Cycle, both of which deal with Atlantis in some extensive detail, including going to Google Earth and looking at the place where it probably was. I have not done that with Lemuria yet because I haven't found the source material for it. So if you know the source material, let me know. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that was discussed. Put it in the box below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discussed in the manner that we are doing here, or if you have the source material for Lemuria, drop that in the boxes down below. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks, or a membership, or even buy the book that I've got coming out. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.